Chapter 9. Several days later, they'd established an easy routine. Steve and Bobby had agreed to 8-hour shifts so that neither had to be up every night, and whoever was off shift slept at Steve's place to avoid being disturbed by any activity in the main house. By the time Rebecca had been there almost a week, she was comfortable enough that it felt like it had been much longer. She and Nick fit well together, they rarely had serious disagreements, and Nick seemed to enjoy the attitude and lively personality that had always gotten her in trouble in her old Chanat. She'd been putting together a grocery list for several days, and when Nick offered to take her into town to get the things she wanted, she readily agreed. While Rebecca went into the bedroom to get her shoes for the trip, Bobby turned to Nick. "How do we go about this? I know you want me to go with you, but do I shadow her the entire time, or what?" "Depends on what we're doing and where we go. Mostly it's common sense. If I need anything special, I'll let you know." "I can deal with that." Rebecca reappeared, ready to go. She grabbed her list. They loaded into the truck and drove into town. During the drive into town, Rebecca kicked off her sandals and curled up in the seat while she considered her list and the men she was feeding, and added several more items. She let the sound of the men's voices as they discussed investment news blur, enjoying the sound without hearing the words. Nick's voice calling her name interrupted her thoughts. "Rebecca." She shook her head briefly, dragging her mind back to the moment. "Sorry, were you talking to me?" "I asked if you had any stops you'd like to make beside the grocery store. Is there a discount or drugstore in town? I'd like to pick up a few things if you don't mind." "Not at all," he replied. "I'll pull into the drugstore first. It's more a variety store, a little bit of everything. If they don't have what you're after, we'll keep looking." "That's fine." She leaned across the console in the center of the seat to lay her cheek against his shoulder. A few minutes later, he pulled into a small lot and parked the truck. Before opening the door, he warned Rebecca. "Kitten, this is a good-sized place and it's popular with tourists. There'll probably be a lot of people in here, I don't know. I'm not trying to crowd you or hang over your shoulder, but I'll feel better if you let me stay with you. Bobby will be close by if we need him too." "All right." She slipped the sandals back onto her heels. "Are we ready?" At Nick's nod, she opened the door and slid off the seat until her feet hit the ground. By the time she gathered her things together and closed the door, Bobby had propped one hip against his closed door beside her, waiting. They met Nick in front of the truck and went inside. As they stepped into the store, Nick picked up a handbasket while making a small hand gesture to the other man. Bobby wandered off, appearing to be in search of something in a different area of the store. Nick wrapped one arm around Rebecca's waist, holding the basket in his other hand. "Let on, kitten," he murmured into her ear. Rebecca looked up at the overhead signs for a moment, trying to spot the area she wanted, and soon she took off toward the health beauty section. She moved purposefully but politely through the close aisles, stopping several times to let others cross an intersection before her. Nick stayed with her the whole time. He appeared to pay attention to nothing and no one but her, but Rebecca knew he was aware of everyone and everything around them. Rebecca had dropped several items in the basket Nick carried when she picked up what she thought was the faint scent of her original Chanat. She stood, looking casually around, but seeing nothing, she decided she must have imagined it, and went back to what she was doing. She finished making her selections and she and Nick left the store, Bobby just a few steps behind. "Did you get everything you were after?" Nick asked, starting the truck. "Most of it. Safeway will have the rest, so we don't need to keep looking." "Sounds good. You hungry?" "I am," Bobby spoke up from the back seat. "I didn't ask you," Nick grouched. Rebecca laughed. Yes, I'm hungry, but I wasn't going to ask. She smiled at Bobby in the mirror of the visor. You need to stop that, Nick told her sternly. If you want or need something, you have only to let me know and I'll get it for you. I didn't want to be any trouble. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly, as though trying to keep his temper in check. It's not any trouble to feed you, we need to eat too. See, so it did matter that Bobby's hungry. She smiled at him, trying to goad him into a better mood. Okay, you got me there. He smiled, shaking his head at her. Let's go eat. After a stop at the same diner they'd eaten at before they made their way to Safeway to get the groceries that had been the main reason for the trip. They stuck together inside the store, Rebecca looking for the things on her list while the men added anything that looked good, mostly junk, to the cart. After they'd paid the bill and exited the store, Rebecca caught the scent again. This time, she knew she wasn't imagining it. The scent was stronger, as if a member of her old Chanat had just walked by. She felt the color drain from her face as stopped so suddenly that Bobby, who'd been walking behind her, nearly ran into her. Do you smell that? She looked both ways, looking for where the scent was coming from. Bobby and Nick both stopped as they scented the air. One of us, Bobby muttered. Not ours, Nick agreed. That's my old Chanat, Rebecca whispered, suddenly terrified and ready to bolt. To the truck, Nick said urgently, handing her the keys. You get in while we load the groceries, if we're attacked you take off. Head back to the house and tell Steve what's going on. He'll see to it you're safe. She started to protest. How could one man protect her better than two? But stopped. She trusted Nick and she'd do what he said. She thumbed the remote to the truck, unlocking the doors as she got close, opened the door and climbed into the driver's seat, locking the doors again before putting the key into the ignition. She waited anxiously, watching all around for anyone to approach them in the parking lot. As the men approached their doors, she shifted, lifting herself over the console of the truck and into her own seat, before unlocking the doors to let them in. They climbed in and in seconds they were on the road home. Bobby, do you have your cell on you? Nick asked. Sure, you want me to call ahead? Please. Let Steve know we haven't seen anyone or been approached, but someone's in town. Will do. He was already pulling his phone out of his pocket and looking through his contacts to find the number. Before Bobby's call could be connected, Nick spoke again. It'll be okay, kitten. He reached one hand over and squeezed hers where it lay on her lap. I promise. I hope you're right. I am, wait and see.